about, so I was thinking about quite a lot about doing this workshop with you, because I feel really privileged to be with a group of women who have ADHD traits. And I just wondered how you think, what you would think if I gave you a whole list of strategies for the next hour. So you might want to put your ideas. So if I just listed 27,000 ways of doing good things, how that would make you feel. All right, so just start to put some stuff in chat for me. First, it allows me to know you're there and you're engaged. Yeah, okay, so Nicola's started. Great, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, okay, so that's what I was thinking. So I was thinking about how do we deliver a workshop on workplace adjustments for women with ADHD. There's lots to explore. Okay, so that's why I'm going to stop and start, and I'm going to provide you with them, but I want you to start to think of what's right for you in the end of this. Okay, so this is, I want you to come away and then do more reflection after this. Okay. So starting with you, I want you to write down, if you were to say to somebody your 3 strengths, what would they be? I could do this workshop for a day, actually, because but we get bored probably and get irritable and fidgety in a sense. So I want you to, but really important, put down 3 words that you could describe yourself, or phrases. When you've done that, just stick your hands up. Metaphorically or really. Okay, you can put them in the chat, or you can write them down yourself if you don't want to share them. It's up to you what you want to share with other people. Okay, so if you want to just keep this for yourself. Okay, so I want these to be your strengths, because we're all different in the room here. Okay, the one thing we've got in common is ADHD. We're going to be really different in lots of ways. So I like some of your. Great. Right. So this is what you're going to be selling yourself with, right? When you're going into the workplace and you're asking for workplace adjustments, I want you to be persuasive. Like Caroline says, persuasive. You're there saying, this is me, this is who I am. You want me, I have ADHD, and not be apologetic. Okay. So you've got to start with your strengths, not because I think we've come from a deficit and a disorder and a very negative framing, which makes us feel different. And you might have felt shame, and you might have felt alone. And I want you to be bold and brave and have the adjectives about yourself that sell yourself well. Okay. Don't be apologetic for asking for adjustments, because you're doing it for productivity reasons. Okay. So the adjustments are there for you to be as productive as possible. So we've got some great, look at that, creative and confident and strategic. I want you to, this is a great group of people, okay? All right, so I want you to really think about that. So I want you to keep that, and I want you to put that painted on your wall, all right? Because I want you to say it every day. This is me, this is my strengths, this is who I want. Now, I like this because I think it gets us to start to say, adjustments are not about apology for what you can't do. They're about productivity to aid you to be your best self, right? And Tim Galway wrote quite a lot about this, and I've got lots of books. So I'll give you a pile of books for you to read afterwards as well, if you want to. And I'll just show you lots of books, which I often scan through because I have ADHD, so I don't read every word of them either, okay? So performance equals potential minus interference. So I want you, in the next hour, we're going to be starting to think about what are the things that stop you being your best self, okay? What interferes? So performance equals your potential minus interference. And that interference might be in person, in place, it might be things at home, it might be things, and we're going to unpack that, okay? So I like that as a framing. Performance equals potential minus interference. Okay, so I want you to start now to think about what are your greatest challenges at home and in the workplace, and how do you describe them to others? So we've talked about your strengths. In your workplace now, if you're in work, or if you are not in work and you've been in work, what do you think are your greatest challenges in work, and what do you think your greatest challenges for you at home? Okay. So we're coming up with, I don't want to interrupt you while you're writing, that'll be irritating. I'll try not to read it out. Okay, so we're hearing things like procrastination, so getting started, doing things that you find tedious or boring, getting overwhelmed with how to approach tasks, where to start, how to plan it out, how to break it up into component parts. Distractions, we can all go down rabbit warrens. It's quite pleasant sometimes, and I think you should allow yourself to go down a rabbit warren occasionally, because I think it's quite nice. Yesterday I put a newsletter out on LinkedIn, which I'll put out probably tomorrow, and I was writing it. I went down a whole rabbit warren of things I was reading to write this thing. It was really pleasurable, and I thought I was enjoying it, right? So sometimes it's allowing yourself to do that is quite nice to do so and not feel like it's a waste of time either, okay? Work consistency, interruption, overrunning on meetings, so the time management. So, but distracting other people, okay. I feel like I'm in good company here, I must say. Okay, so I think we've got to go, what are the things that are causing, so procrastination, time management, boring tasks, getting to deadlines, interrupting other people, because that might be a problem in the workplace if you're starting to want to talk to other people and they're in the zone and you're interrupting them. Yeah, that the getting started on the boring tasks. So we're going to come back to some techniques to help you with that. Okay, and I'm looking at home and the workplace, because for you to be effective in the workplace, you've got to be effective at home, right? We can't separate those two things, so that's really important. Yeah, back-to-back meetings. I do think, you know, it's bloody exhausting. I think it really is. You know, when you go boom, 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 and you've got no time for preparation to get your head in gear, and no time to mop up after. So ideally a 20 plus 10 or 40 plus 20, having 40-minute meetings or 20-minute meetings, always with a 10-minute gap or 20-minute, so you've got time to prepare. Everybody should do that, really. I don't always. I'm saying what to do, not doing as I say, you know, but it's really important. Getting to bed early enough and getting enough sleep. How many of you have challenges with your sleep as well? Is that a problem? Busy brain, difficulty switching off. Is that a problem? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Too much to do. Yes. Okay. So home and work are really important. Okay. 308. Yeah. So sleep disturbance. So getting to sleep or waking up in the middle of the night. Okay. I'll come back to that. If we've got time at the end to give you some strategies for that as well. More hours in the day. Okay. Okay, so I want you now to think about what helps you and what hinders you. So what makes you be your best self? Where? Who? Right? What time of the day? Start to think about that as well. When are you your best self when it comes to work? Where are you? So Alexandra's saying playing music. So think about the environment you're in, the time of the day when you work your best. So Nicola, you're saying morning and evening, are your mornings good, evenings bad? Just right, which way around? Help, exercise, boyfriend, often good and help me be accountable. So we've got some people are bad in the morning, some people, I'm a morning person, so I go in the evening. Some people are evening people. So finding that out and when you work optimally is really important. And that's going to be important when you're asking for adjustments, or you're thinking about hybrid working, or you're thinking that the hours you're working. You have to work out this, and you've got to create your own menu of what is right and works best for you. And if you don't do this, you can't ask people, because you're not prepared to know what to ask about. Okay, right, 10 to 2 is optimal work time. Okay, so where placing yourself in the right place, mid mornings and late afternoons. Okay, So it's recognizing those patterns is going to mean that you're going to work. And it also means that you recognize when you're not, and you don't waste time. Because I think sometimes we sit doing nothing because we think we should be sitting there and we should be working, and we're wasting hours of time. We actually should go and be gardening or walking or doing something else, right? Giving yourself permission. Those are down times when you can't do your work focus. Out doing something else, when you put yourself away. When you're talking to somebody, or you've had a meeting with somebody else and you've been talking creatively, do you then come up with ideas afterwards? You can unmute if you want to as well. So anybody wants to share their experiences. So look at that. You're all quite different. You've got different times. Some of you, yeah, some of you early, and then you're finished for the day. So each of you have got to map out. There isn't a ADHD. We've got circadian rhythm problems, and often sleep is a problem, but lots of people are going to have challenges in different times, and they're going to focus in different ways. Okay, so you can look by your responses. Yeah. So you've got to look at that, because you're going to have to articulate this to ask for adjustments as well, really. Okay, why are you going for the job? Do you have to go do the job you've got because you have to? So I've got some people who are, this is the job I got because that's the only job I can get at the moment. So that's a practical thing. You're skilled, and so you've got the job because you're skilled in that. Or you really want to motivate you, you're interested in it, okay? So Natalia's saying, which is, I work in a creative industry and have to, as my mindset doesn't fit anywhere else. How many of you feel like you're in the right environment that suits you? And how many of you? Okay, thanks, Caroline. Okay. How many are in situations that don't suit you? So some of you have found the right place. And I'm seeing that with ADHD folks, is that being self-employed, being in a creative area, being with other people who understand how you work effectively in different ways, if you can get there, yeah, that really helps. But lots of people who are ADHD aren't in creative industries. They're in science, they're in STEM, they're in other places as well, yeah. Right, and too repetitive. Great, thanks, Abigail. And I think read what other people's comments are. I think it's really useful to hear what it's like for other people as well. Okay, so perfectly would be the right job in the right environment, working the right hours. And some of that's going to be constrained. If you're self-employed, you can do that. If you're task or project oriented, you can do that. So if you've got a project you've got to do and you've got a deadline, but if you can work early in the morning, late in the evening, and you can go have time in the day where you're not operating, you can decide your hours. But if you're having to go into an office space where it's 9 to 5, that's going to be, you're going to have less flex in what you can have adjusted. Okay. Yeah, and quite a few of you are saying I'm working for myself because it's too difficult. And I think that's a challenge. I find I mean, I work for other people, I work for myself. I flex my hours, you know, in terms of, but often too long. So the other bit is making sure that you don't burn yourself out. Okay, lots of human interaction, but a lot of admin. Okay, so yeah, I think that's, so there's a balance between being self-employed and having to do all of it, and being in a job where other people can do some parts. And in some jobs, you can job carve. It depends on the flexibility of your workplace and space. So what stops you at work being your best self? What's your greatest barrier at work? What's your greatest barrier? Okay. Too many tasks? So we've got some people who go too much process, some people who have too little process, some people balancing home and work life, the ability to switch and fully focus. Okay. And Abigail, you were talking about imposter syndrome. I think, you know, so yeah, so I think females, particularly with ADHD, the more I live and breathe with other women, is I see a couple of things. One is around what people term rejection sensitivity dysphoria, so highly sensitive to comments because of past experiences and a lack of confidence in who you are and your capability and abilities. And so a droplet of comment from somebody else can be quite wounding, and you're easily wounded. You're very empathic and you absorb it, right? The other thing that I see, that I'm seeing in groups of women, I don't like to clump us all together because we're all really different, but is I think it's a sort of tend and befriend mode. So I think what happens quite often, and that's why I think a lot of women with ADHD have been missed, is because we go into busy mode. We go into busy helping other people, clearing the plates, doing the things, offering to do stuff. And what I'm seeing, and I don't know whether you've had this yourself, is you go overtime. So when somebody offers to do something, you do more of it. You don't know how much is enough, so you do more. You get exhausted. So you do flat out too much, exhausted, have to pick yourself up. Yeah. So anybody else feeling that and have those experiences? So burnout is something that I think is associated with ADHD in females particularly. And I do think that sort of tend and befriend mode is something that really we're not sure about how what's enough. I think that's a problem. So we go overboard just in case. And that feeds back to the sort of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, because if you're not sure, and the imposter syndrome, whatever these phrases mean, but it's like, I don't quite know, so I'm going to have to really prove myself. And then you get absolutely knackered on the way there. Yeah. So, and I think that's important for us to stop and think about that, because this is, I think that I'm talking about adjustments. I'm going to be talking about workplace adjustments. So I can't do this in isolation though, because unless you understand your whole self at home and work and your patterns of behavior, how do you know what to ask other people to do for you, right? Because you can see some of you need open space, some of you need constraint, and you need somebody to work with you. You need somebody to help with time frames. You need to be able to articulate what's required in order to do so. Yeah. So I think that, and the secondary, like Loretta's saying about having secondary impact on your physical well-being as well. Estimation of time, I can't underestimate that. If you don't understand time concepts and you can't break tasks into component parts, and you're in a new workplace where you haven't got clear understanding from other people about what the expectations are. So you're given 3 tasks to do, but nobody says when they expect you to have it completed by, or how long that task is supposed to take. That's really important to ask those things, okay? Ask about other people's expectations, because that, I think we go into overkill because we're not sure, and we're reticent to ask because we don't want to be thought of as not capable. So you get into that cycle of not asking for help and clarification on that basis, okay? So if you don't know what the expectation is, and you don't know what good looks like in that task that somebody's given you to do, especially you're in a new workplace or you're consulting, ask for clarification. When do you expect this done? Are there other people that are relying upon you to deliver something? So you're in a chain of other people. So what's the implications? Okay. So clarification of what's important from what's not, and what the timelines are expected. That can really, I see that problem being very problematic. So Hannah's saying breaking down larger projects and either over underestimating time. Yeah, I think it's really, so that time concept and estimation of time is a real problem. Yeah. And either you underestimate and then you come in late and you get into trouble, or you put so much time, you're exhausted in the process. And then if you're a consultant, if you're doing sort of consultancy, self-employment, you've undercharged, right, for what the job is, because you thought that it would be quicker to do. So Alex is saying, also having self-awareness. I think an email will take a few minutes, but I have to change it a few times. So this is procrastination, and also ADHD doesn't often come alone, right, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about now as well. So I want you to start off by, that's why I started with some of those questions, okay? And you need to understand about yourself and your well-being, and understand what's going in your bucket, your stress bucket. So I use the stress bucket analogy, is that we've got things that have happened in our past. You might have had major life events in the last 12 months that have been filling up your bucket, which means you've got less capacity to cope with those things in work. You might have things going on at home, in your family, or if you're married with kids, you've got other things to contest with. You might be things going in your bucket now, which might be filling up that you were able to cope when you were working only from home, and now you've got to go back into an office. You've got travel as well as everything else. So you were coping in your own environment. Now you've got another load coming in. So I want you to think about the things that are going on in your bucket now and the last 12 months. So have you moved house? Have you had kids? Have you had changed job? Have you been unwell? Those things will be filling up your bucket and say how much you can cope, your capacity to cope at the moment. Really important that you understand where your bucket is filled at any one time, because it'll allow you what capacity for you to cope, and whether you need to be a bit kinder to yourself, right? I think that we have to learn to be kind to ourselves. The other bit is that when your bucket's full, if it overflows, you might have physical and psychological symptoms and signs, and it's recognizing what your symptoms and signs are that you're not coping, because you're going to be asking for adjustments. And if you don't understand yourself, how can you ask somebody to help you? So I want you to think about whether you get headaches or back pain, your sleep gets worse. I grind my teeth more when I'm stressed, backache, neck ache, tummy pains. Somebody said gastritis or irritable bowel. What are your symptoms and signs? Are you irritable? Do you shout at the cat, your partner? What are your symptoms and signs? I want you to get to know what they are, because I want you to understand if your bucket's starting to get full, those are markers for you to be aware, all right? Yeah, so yes, so Loretta's saying work stays okay, but then can't cope at home, right? So this is lose weight, eat more, eat less, sleep more, sleep less. Each one of us will have different symptoms and signs, and it's really understanding your own, okay? And I think it is when you want to, I want to go to bed early. I'm tired. I put my, want to go into the covers. I want to retreat. I know I grind my teeth. And I think it's helped me a lot to recognize when I'm not coping as well, is to recognize those early signs. Okay. Drinking alcohol, right? What do you do to empty your buckets? Okay. So I want you to think about what keeps you well. What do you do to keep well? So this is proactively keeping well, to empty your bucket so you can cope so you've got more capacity to cope. So Alex is saying neglecting home tasks, becoming irritable, sarcastic. My sarcasm level goes up, unfortunately, for other people at those times. Okay. So Natalia's saying your bucket never feels too full. Okay. So you worried about slowing down. So that can be, I'll come back to that. So having that dopamine rush, and you're looking for it, and we get burnt out on that basis, okay? So getting your dopamine addict, in a sense of wanting to find that, to get that boost. And when you don't get it, and you're worried about stopping quite often. Okay, make myself busy to avoid what I need. Yeah, exercise, listening to music, playing the keyboard. So I've got a real thing that I think people with ADHD can't do, looking at a candle and sitting still. That's just not, quiet mindfulness is just not built for people with ADHD. I was saying last time to the previous group I was talking to, I'm using VR and experimenting with virtual reality and doing meditation, Tai Chi, doing lots of things, trying different VR games out to see what works. And they're really so immersive that I find that's actually quite good because I find sitting still is too difficult to do. Yeah. So sleep stories, yep, on the Calm app, I use that as well. Audible stories, right? So walking, exercise of different sorts, and then things like calming, talking to other people. Yeah. Okay, walking, podcasts, yeah, active rest, great. Passive rest, bad and draining. Yep. So I think that's the bit. We've got to find ways to do active rest, which is helping us, taking it away from here. So it's not all up here, it's elsewhere, that you can have time to do. Yeah, I think we need to do mindlessness, not mindfulness. Okay. So I think that's really, it's too boring. I really is. Yeah, cleaning. Yes, a lot of people say cleaning as well. So I want you to think about that. Okay. So I know we've spent time on this, but this is really important. And I want you to just think about, are there any circles in your life that keep repeating themselves? Yeah. Do you get into, and I want you to be aware of that. You do too much and you get knackered, you get a flu or a cold, and you just go, you get better and you forget about it and you go back into your same mode of practice again. Okay. So I want you to just really think about this afterwards, to reflect on that. And yeah, because why do we have burnout cycles? Why do we allow ourselves to do that when we know we've done it before? That's stupid, isn't it? You know, so we've got to stop that and go, why do we keep doing it? But it's hard. I don't say you're stupid, because it is stupid that we keep doing that. We put ourselves in those positions. Okay. So we get into those cycles. So I want you to see what's happening when you're doing it, so you can try and gain control over it. Okay. And I want you to think about the if then, right? If X happens, then this happens. If this happens, then that happens. I want you to start thinking about, when I do this, this is the consequence. Okay. If I do this, then I feel better. If I do this, then I feel worse. If I do this, right? So I want you to start doing the if then. Okay. Cuddling the dog. Yeah, I have 2 dogs, and I find stroking the dog is really helpful. Yeah. Okay, so Brailsford was a cyclist, the coach to the cyclists in the Olympics about 8-10 years ago. And we did really well in the UK on cycling, because what he did was deconstructed all of these little bits, which was, if we did this, would it help? If we did this, would it help? And they started adjusting lots and lots and lots of tiny bits. And they realized by doing that, that gave them a positive advantage. They didn't say, this is the way to do it. And that's why I want you to start going, each one of these small items you get to know and understand together will contribute to making an impact for you. And it may be a lot of little things that you need to adjust rather than the big thing. Okay. So that's really important. So the accumulation of marginal gains, Brailsford. Okay. Setting new habits is difficult. Absolutely. So that's why I don't want you to change your life overnight. We're going to make really small adjustments that you can try, right? Because if I said 10 big things to do, you wouldn't do them. It would be a waste of time completely, right? So you're going to have to try and do very small adjustments that you can actually start to try, but you might need to come back to, and you might need to come back to 10 times before you actually put them in practice. So you've got to think about, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I sort of took their idea and sort of started to do it, which is often, I think we go, it's too much time, it's too much effort, it's not worth the time investment because the gain isn't great enough. But some things could be a big gain. So I just started plotting this out, but I think it's quite an interesting thing about how much time you invest. So it could be that your gain, setting up a diary system with alerts and alarms and with prompts, could really actually have a huge gain. But you might need to spend time doing that and getting used to putting things in place every time and setting alarms and getting that to be automated, right? So time investment quite a bit. Gain might be good, so it might be worth doing. So you're going to have to think about that balance between effort and output, okay? So doing a to-do list each day, you've got to be able to do the to-do list. So it doesn't take long, but how much gain do you gain from it, okay? 5-minute mindfulness, I'm thinking about walking around, taking a break, may be good, doesn't take up much time, may not have huge amounts of gain, but it might be a drip in your bucket. Setting a focus blocker. Are you an email cruiser? So do you keep checking your emails every 5 minutes, checking your emails every 5 minutes, going on Twitter and da, 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 da? Do you have some awful habits that stop you because you go off and do that and you're multitasking? So Alex is saying, my life has changed so much, so consistently using calendars and alarms and alerts. If it's not the diary or there isn't a reminder, it won't happen. I agree, Alex. You know, that's why I put it as a real gain. My diary with my alerts and alarms is my second brain. Without it, I couldn't function. I really couldn't. I couldn't remember what to do, and I couldn't. My life is crazy busy. And if I didn't have a diary, it would be absolutely useless. With alerts, with alarms, okay? But I had to get very much into a pattern of putting it in. What would be a focus blocker? Sarah's asking. Okay, so a focus blocker, you can set it on your computer. There are a number of different ones that you can use. If you put focus blocker into Google, you're going to come up with them, and you can set them. And what it means is you set on your screen. So if you're doing a piece of work that you've got to do, you can set, and it means you can't go and check your emails. You can't go on Google for a period of time. You can set what you can't do for a period of time. So that can be quite useful when you've got you want 20 minutes and you need to focus on that task. Last time, I don't know if I put it up here, last time I talked about the Pomodoro technique. Has anybody used Pomodoro or know what it is? So, yeah, so some people do, some people don't. So Pomodoro technique is 20 minutes with a 5 minute, 20 minute, 5 minutes, or 25-5, yeah? Working out for yourself, yeah? So this is 25 minutes with a 5 minute break, and then and you might set that up 25-5, 25-5, 25-5, and then have a longer break. But some people find 25 is too long and is finding your optimum balance. You might find you start to drift after 15, right? So you could do that. And then you might use your focus blocker to stop you going off because you've set your task. If you haven't completed it in that time, it doesn't matter, but you take a break and then you come back to it and you refocus again, okay? So Pomodoro can be useful, but you've got to find your own. So I don't like it because I get distracted in the 5 minutes and never going back. So you've got to so you've got to decide what you're going to do in the 5 minute breaks as well. Okay, so Dawn says, I don't like it. Yeah, and Sarah says, I don't. Right. I bought a visual, and Hannah's saying I bought a visual timer that's colored. So each one of these techniques will work for some people, will work some of the time, won't work all of the time. You might find Pomodoro works in the morning if that's your fresh time, and you set yourself a task that you've got something specific you've got to focus on. It can work for that, but may be lousy later in the day, right? Because you just might drift too quickly. So you've got to, these are ideas that might be helpful, okay? Yeah, do you want to show the timer, Hannah? You want to share that? Right, lovely. Visual timer, so you can see it, time passing. Everybody can see that? Yeah, those are nice. You can have a watch like it as well. So yeah, so really great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So I'll come back to some other stuff. So you might use things like Post-it notes, big visual things to have up on your board, right? On your wall to have in front of you. How many of you are list makers? And endless list makers, the list of the list of the list. Okay, love a list. It's interesting, I know. I think it is a trait because I think it helps to dump, you know, so I think it helps reduce anxiety to write the list. I think it doesn't really matter what's on the list quite often. It's the fact that you put it on down helps you to try to sort out your busy brains, okay? So I think I have to get it on the page, yeah. And rewarding ticking things off. Yeah, Post-its, loads of lists. I think we are list makers. I think we really are, but I'm not sure the value of the content of the list. I think sometimes it is a dumping activity, which helps, you know, helps to get it off your brain. One notebook with it. Yeah, so Caroline's saying a notebook. So sometimes I will have an ongoing notebook, because then at least I've got it in one place rather than lots of sheets of paper that then get out of order. Okay. So think about how much time you've got. You might want to try these things out. You might want to come back to them. It is interesting, the notebook thing. Yeah, how many of you are, yeah, I think a lot of us are note makers. We do keep, and I've tried, I've got one of these, which is a remarkable. So this is a virtual notepad, right? So that I'm trying to think, save paper. So that's another way of doing it, okay? Or you can do task lists in Outlook. I quite like this because it's got a pen. I think the motor act of writing can be quite useful to just putting it down. So it's different from typing it in some ways. You've got relatively on the page as well, so that helps if you're seeing things visually. Okay. Put that down again before I drop it. Okay. So I want you to think about your spiky profile. So when I'm saying that is that last time we talked about this a little bit, but ADHD doesn't come alone. It co-occurs with lots of other conditions, right? Somebody's got Apple Pencil and an iPad, brilliant. So what we look is ADHD overlaps with other neurodivergent traits often, right? So some of you may have ADHD plus other bits. So you might have ADHD plus autism, or ADHD plus dyslexia, or ADHD plus dyspraxia, right? Or you may not have enough symptoms to have another diagnosis, but you might have some traits in other areas, okay? And that's the norm, right? I don't know many people who are purely ADHD or purely any neurodivergent conditions. So I drew this really, and what you can see is all of these things have little trails going through. This is my ADHD brain, trying and organize it. And we call these things really by difficulties generally. So it's a fairly negative framing. So you might have elements of other areas. So when you're thinking about your workplace adjustments, it's no good just to say, I have ADHD. You need to be learning to articulate what is, so Loretta's dyslexia and dyscalculia, specific language. Yeah, so we've got different people with different overlaps. You are going to, your workplace adjustments isn't about a diagnosis. It's about what do you need to support you in your job appropriately to be your most productive. Okay, so it's not about labels, it's about you. All right, so each one of you can have different patterns of strengths and challenges, and you're thinking about how do I make myself most productive. So your brain, you don't have one brain for neurodiversity and another one for well-being. Usually we see that there are higher rates of things like anxiety and depression. You've got to look after yourself, right? I know that people with ADHD have higher rates of mental health challenges. That's the reality. So you've got to be able to, it's a bit like having, you might be vulnerable to diabetes. You need to understand that, or vulnerable to heart disease, right? In your family, right? You need to understand that and look after yourself. That's why emptying your bucket is so important. It really is, right? It's really thinking about how do I look after myself? I don't get into those burnout cycles. So you've only got one brain, right? We haven't got two brains, unfortunately. And what we know is the prevalence of ADHD is higher. We see more, we do see higher rates of suicide, sadly. We see high rates of bipolar disorder, obsession compulsive disorder, substance misuse, eating disorders, and anxiety. If I had time, I would go into this a bit more with you, but it really is important, okay, that you look after yourself, okay? And that's why there's thinking about yourself and your patterns of behavior and what drives you to behave in a certain way, what drives you to stay well is going to be fundamental to all of you in the next 15, 20, 30 years. It really is, right? So that's why you're emptying your bucket, how you're doing that, whether you're going for walks, you're taking exercise, you're doing, Tai Chi, swimming, it doesn't matter what it is. It's about what works for you. I think I'm increasingly interested in the power of getting out into seeing depth and distance, or walks, right? So getting away from the commuter and seeing distance and relative to you. I think there is something, it is awesome to have an all walk, right? So think about that when you're getting out, because especially if you're living in a city, it's quite hard to see distance, isn't it, really? And see green, right? So the power of that can be helpful. So you've all got spiky profiles. This is from our profiler showing different spiky profiles, okay? So you'll all be different. ADHD is the one bit you've got in common. Hannah's booked a forest bathing course. What's that? Hannah, tell us what your forest bathing course is.
Yeah, so it's from what I understand so far, I do a lot of hiking, but it's like a step further, and it's Japanese thing, and it'd be interesting to see like what we've always said around the kind of meditation and mindfulness, which I have tried in the past, but I thought it's evidently a technique of using outside like to your advantage. And so yeah, I'm going to try that for a couple of hours and a course on it and see if it's something that I can kind of implement ongoing. So I'm not sure yet exactly what the techniques are going to be, or what the results are, but it was part of a New Year's resolution of doing something different every month.
Brilliant.
Trying something different every month.
Great, Hannah. You let us know. I want to know what forest bathing's like. Okay. I think the fact of being able to get out and see green and take yourself out of, you're not sitting still, you're moving, I think is very useful. It's something we can all do, and it doesn't cost much either. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the other bit, that it's possible, going for walks and everything. So I want you to flip your narrative. You're going to be going into asking for your workplace adjustments, or if you're working for yourself, I want you to sell those strengths. I want you to be proud and loud and say, I have ADHD, this is me, and these are the things that I can do really well. You want me because I'm bloody good at these things, okay? And I think that's really important, that you start to shout. And then you can start to say, however, in order for me to be my most productive, I need to have some support in these areas. I need training. I need skills gaps. These are my areas. So that's the language that is really important when you're asking, because otherwise we are apologetic. I'm really sorry, I have ADHD. We start with that. We apologize in our first sentence, right? Most men, we're in a room full of women, so I can say this, most men don't do that. They do the opposite. Bold and brave, I'm here, now help me out, right? And I think as a group, obviously, this is a huge sweeping statement, but I think be bold and brave and start to have the language to articulate your strengths, okay? And that's why you're great, because you've got those things. That's what makes you enthusiastic and energetic, and seeing those linkages. That's why you've got your notepads, all of us, because we're writing down things because they're coming in and they're buzzing in your brain, right? So you're seeing connections that other people won't see. So that's brilliant, okay? So think about the things that you're really good at. Just be mindful about what else is happening at the moment. So it could be, I'm seeing people getting quite stressed because they're having to go back into the workplace. They were able to cope because they were working from home. Now they're having to do the commute as well. Then that is just a tipping point. It's a bit more exhausting, a bit more tiring. You're worried, you might be anxious about getting COVID and getting ill, and what are those things that are going to go on, right? So just be aware of that. Be aware when your sleep is going up and down as well. Think about yourself. We're women, right? I think in the last workshop, I haven't got time to talk about it today, but you might find that there's certain times when before your period that your dopamine levels are going to go down, right? So your ADHD traits may go up, okay? So we've got to recognize there are certain times in the month when estrogen has an effect on dopamine, all right? I don't know if anybody, I can't see everybody's faces, but if you're like me, postmenopausal, I'm a sort of ancient cruddy thing, then my estrogen's gone, right? So having estrogen in HRT helps in terms of maintaining that levels, okay? So, and if you are on the pill, you might want to think about taking the pill back to back so you don't get these estrogen drops, okay? So think about how you go along your month as well, because that might be important in terms of when you're targeting a piece of work. There might be periods of the month where that is more important to focus on stuff, okay? So in order to ask for adjustments, you need to consider, what do you want? So I want you to come with your package, what you don't want. And I want you to think about, do you need task adaptations or do you need environmental adaptations, okay? So your employer, if it's an employer, can't change you, but you need to think about where do you work best, and if you need adaptations, do you need a quiet place? Do you need somewhere else? So I want you to think about 3 A's: avoid, adapt, and adjust. What do you need to avoid? What do you need to adapt? And what do you need to have adjustments for? Okay, so avoid might be sitting in a busy office with lots of noise, being sat next to the water cooler because you're going to listen to everybody's conversation and get interested in what they're saying. So it might be moving away. Adapt might be working part of the time at home, part of the time in an office. When you're doing certain tasks, you want to work in one place. And adjustments might be things like focus blockers, or if you're dyslexic as well, thinking about grammar checkers, spell checkers, those sort of things. So this is why it's worth it. I'm going to come up with some strategies, because I'll give you those, but I want you to work out those other things, because without the strategies, without those, you're not going to do it. So I'll give you the notes afterwards. All right, I'll share these slides with you afterwards, okay? Because I'm going to we'll run out of time because I've got too much to share with you, okay? So I want you to think about, first of all, what scaffolding works for you, right? Start off with, does a to-do list ever work? Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Do you make a shopping list? Does that help you? Or do you leave your shopping list at home? Is your greatest scaffolding someone in your house who prompts you, who organizes you and tells you what to do? Be realistic. Sometimes we need somebody else to prompt us. So it could be in the workplace, having a 5-minute meeting with somebody in work is really important, because that's going to help to prompt you what's important, what's not. Okay. So think about what helps you. Is it having somebody coaching you? So having a regular meeting with somebody, right? Where are you? Where do you need to do? What do you need to do next? Do you find that actually having a spare set of keys, because you keep losing keys, so cutting 5 sets of keys is your strategy, right? Right. So I want you to think about the things that, what's being terrible if you've shut yourself out of the house, or and you didn't have a spare set of keys. So think about the disasters as well and how you could compensate. Okay. Do you sometimes, scaffolding helps, like if you're exhausted, you take off the clothes to the laundrette and somebody else does the ironing for you, or you have a takeaway one night a week, because that's much easier than cooking on a heavy duty day, right? I want you to think about what scaffolding you use. These are all scaffolding tools. So one thing at a time. You can't take on a whole load of strategies because they'll just fail, right? So if you're going to adopt new strategies, you've got to try and do things. And these are things that some people have found useful, all right? So a ready to do, a doing, and a done. And you could have a Kanban, like a big whiteboard, and you put 3 lines in front of you, and you just dump things in those things, okay? And you can put them on sticky notes, and you can move them over, or you can have it on your computer. You could create one, okay? And you could do things like Trello boards. Yeah, so I don't know if some of you use Trello boards or Miro. These are like boards online you can use that do the same sort of thing. Some people find, though, and my reticence to tell you some of this is, some people find it so interesting making the boards, they don't do the work. So they spend hours creating beautiful boards, right? And then get left, and then spend the whole time setting up your systems, and you don't get completing it. So batch your tasks, right? So the other thing is, have you got a few things that you need to do that you know will only take you 5 minutes? So try and put some 5-minute tasks together, because I realize that often we prevaricate because we think it's going to take us much longer. So having a list of 5-minute things. So when we're doing the Pomodoro, 5-minute lists of things that you could do. So it could be putting on the washing if you're at home. It could be preparing something for supper. Have some 5-minute tasks you've got up your hand. So if you've got it, you've got some ideas, because otherwise you won't use them, right? So having them, thinking about that. I want you to create yourself a music list, a curated list of sounds and music and noises that you like, that you'll use at different times. Because I find I've got music on Spotify, music to aid me concentrate. I love it some days, I hate it other days, right? So I want you to create your own curated list. Music to dance to, music to focus on, right? So in your 5 minutes, it might be music to dance to, ABBA, get up and move around, right? Whatever it is, okay? But that helps you because you're not looking for these things. We waste time because we haven't got some of these things in our pocket to use, okay? Cultivate a deliberate imbalance, right? Instead of trying to focus on everything, and I think we've said earlier on today in the session, you've got times in the day which you really find it quite hard to stay focused. You're tired, you've done a lot. Give yourself a chance to enjoy that time, right? Give yourself permission to not have to keep focusing. And that's where the mindlessness, stuff, going for a walk, giving your brain time off will help you to be better in the times when you're actually setting yourself down to focus. Okay. How many of you have had access to work or workplace assessments? Certainly you have. Yeah, Linda as well. Okay. First of all, there's a waiting. It's quite hard. You need to be persistent. And it can help because you can get coaching in place, you can get support in place, you can get software in place. Okay, but there is a bit of a waiting list. You have to generate them. You could do that if you're self-employed as well. It can be really useful to get some coaching guidance as well. Okay, so ask for access to work if you're in the workplace. If you've got a diagnosis, you don't have to have a diagnosis to get access to work either. Ask for your line manager for a discussion and a plan. If you're moving into a new workplace and you haven't been there before, then you need to be thinking about, what do people expect me to do? Again, that sort of time frames. What's the expectation? What does good look like? So you don't do overboard when everybody else is, you've got minimalists who will do just what they need. You're doing much more, right? So if you're not sure, have a discussion and a plan, and document that with the line manager. And you can do something like we have a work with me passport. Write down what's agreed, so you've got that plan in place. Okay, what do I need? What's been agreed? What's been discussed? And then if you move somewhere else, you can don't have to start from scratch. Discuss about your communication needs. That's going to be important when you're making adjustments. What's an expectation? If you don't understand a list of 10 things sent to you in an email because you can't understand what's important from what's not, you might need your line manager, if you have one, to color code to indicate which is really important from which is not, and to give some idea of timelines. This one's important because other people are waiting for that. This one I need by Wednesday. This one doesn't matter, it could be in the next couple of weeks. Okay. Hannah said, I've had an opt-out assessment, but they just said I need to come up with what I want. Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why people don't know. Occy Health doesn't really know about ADHD. So, and each one of you are going to need different adjustments in the context of the environment you're in, the task you're doing. So part of this is, that's why that first part of this hour is about you understanding your own needs, because you will be the best person to be able to ask for it. Other scripts are having good convos around adjustments. Start being positive, right? Showing what your strengths are, being articulate about what you need that will help you to be your best self, to be able to focus and understand what you need, okay? Because most people will not know what adjustments to put in place. Remembering some of you have got ADHD plus dyslexia, ADHD plus dyspraxia, ADHD plus dyscalculia. There's going to be different ways. Place generally somewhere quiet away for distractions, or a mean to cut out noise, right? So that's going to be one thing. Places and spaces, that's a reasonable adjustment. Ability to work from home or hybrid working. So articulating that you will do some of your best work when you are not with everybody else, but you might need to go in. If you're creative, you want that space and that buzz. So thinking about where you work on your own most effectively, where you work with other people. Working specific hours. We've heard people are good here, and that might be that you work in blocks and you're project orientated rather than hour orientated. So yes. Thinking about your chair in your desk, about 40% of people with ADHD have dyspraxia or developmental coordination disorder as well. So thinking about your desk, if you've got an up-down desk, some people who've got ADHD find I have an up-down desk here, and sometimes if I'm finding it hard to focus, I will stand up and work from a standing desk rather than a sitting one, and then I will sit down again. So changing where you are and how you're working can help you to focus as well. Fidget toys, allowing and being able to, it's okay to have a set of fidget toys and being able to have those. I have elastic bands, I have pebbles, I have little ringy bally things, I've got shells, right? I've got various things on my desk that I will use. So understanding, so a reasonable adjustment is understanding that you may fidget, you may need to get up, you may need to walk around in meetings. That is an adjustment, okay? That it's acceptable to do so and that you're not losing interest. In another reasonable adjustment would be being able to say that in these sort of meetings, like many of you have done, you've turned your cameras off because it's easier to hear me and look at the slides and not be distracted by other people as well. That's a reasonable adjustment. You're needing to articulate that. You need to, because for some people, you will want the camera on some of the time, you'll want the camera off some of the time. So the more that you can explain that, the better it's going to be, okay? So a diary system, we've talked, so tools, so we thought about place, space, movement, help. So work adjustments would be things like help with the organization, setting up your diary, setting up timelines, having it depends on where you are, but having a virtual PA to prompt you. But your diary system is really important. That's your virtual PA in many ways. Management of emails at specific times. Can you do review? Multitasking is not good, bouncing back and forth. Can you look at your emails in blocks and getting into a habit of doing so? That really can save you time, okay? So getting used to doing some of these things. Tidy hacks, well, rewarding yourself, being pleased about, well, I've been pretty good today, right? So if you can do your, when you're focusing on tidying up, perhaps if you tidy up your bedroom, your drawers, your workspace, then you're going to give yourself something as a reward on doing so, being nice. Trying the 1 minute rule. So setting yourself a timer on your phone. How much can you do in 1 minute, right? That can be sometimes then 2 minutes, right? Giving yourself an incentive to do stuff. Try these habits out, okay? Habit of starting and ending your day. Start the day with a to-do list, clear everything, end the day tidying up your area you're working as well, okay? Getting used to doing those things. And then make yourself one task a week for those items you ignore. So the boring things is allocate yourself a time that these are boring. I need to do the filing. It's going to be on a Friday afternoon for between 1 and 3 or 1 and 2. I'm going to do these tasks, allocating a specific time for those boring tasks. So you're not trying to do the boring tasks all the time. Okay, somebody's got a spinning ring, a fidget pen. Anybody else with other fidgety things they use? Want to share? Okay, so I want you to think about, we're just up for time. I've tried to cover quite a lot. When you do your work, where do you do your work? Thinking about eating and drinking, because I think that eating healthily helps, right? Drinking plenty of water and taking daily exercise is important. Getting into good sleep habits. So getting a sleep routine, taking away from your computer, taking away from your mobile phone, not checking your emails before you're going to sleep at night, nor the middle of the night, checking your emails in the middle of the night. If you find you have a busy brain, using something like Calm app or listening to an audio book that you can hear, that you can take your brain away to somewhere else, can often get you to calm down. That can really help. I think relaxation techniques for when we've got ADHD needs to be something moving or doing. So it could be painting, it could be jigsaw, it could be solitaire, it could be Wordle, it could be, but doing something away from here helps you to relax, and it's finding out what works for you, okay? And then I think managing your emotions, really think about your mental health and well-being, right? And this is about not an afterthought, it's a forethought. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll take a couple of any questions you've got as well. So I could go slower and take a half day or a day to going through this, but in an hour I've tried to pack in as much as I can. Anybody want to ask me anything? You can come off mute if you want as well.
Can I ask, I've read stuff about people saying, I guess in the Pomodoro or similar techniques of doing in boring tasks, then going and doing something that kind of creates dopamine. And I think I'm quite new to this, my diagnosis in January, it would be really useful for other people to say if they know the kind of things that that they can do quickly that kind of boosts their dopamine. I know the music thing is one, but it would be interesting to know the other things that people use or do to kind of.
So dance and music, going out for a run, going for a walk, doing those sort of things really can help. Anybody want to chip in while I'm showing you some books? So this is the checkout. I can put the list, I can take a photo of these. So this is the checkout, quite checklist, Atul Gawande, quite a good one. Each of these will come up with a few suggestions, I think. I've also got an app which gives you a review of books. You don't have to read them all. That is an ADHD trick, isn't it? Right? I thought that somebody's really who's designed that. You pay for it, you get the first few. I'll find you the name of it. Short form, I think it's called short form. Okay. Burnout. There's two sisters who wrote this book. I think it's really quite good. Burnout. Okay. So this is Solve Your Stress Cycle, and it's by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Came out last year in the middle of COVID. Yeah, Sarah says good book. This is okay. I don't know, 18 minutes to get the right things done. Find your focus. I think it's written by somebody who doesn't have ADHD, so that's probably not worth reading. I'll keep giving you different. I can send things around for you. Okay, all right. I think the short form book is brilliant because that's ideal. You know, I'm really interested in this, but I'm never going to read it all. Right? So it allows you to get an understanding of whether it's worth reading it as well. So that's really helpful. Yeah, burnout. I think burnout is. I think the Emily Burnout book is. I think it's good. Dawn, you said you enjoyed it as well. I thought it was good. Sarah saying quick dopamine fixes. Offers a walk the long way to get water, use my phone, just scroll social media. I think the problem we've got is that I think social media is quite addictive and it could also raise your anxiety levels, right? So although it's helping you with dopamine, I'm not sure it's we can become very addicted to it. So just be mindful of that. Okay? Yeah. So walking, exercise, solitaire, Wordle, things that distract you, but don't over-engage you, right, are useful, I think, really. 15 cups of decaf tea. Yeah, I drink loads and loads, tea breaks, make tea endlessly during the day, because it's a way of getting up to go and do something. Okay, so I hope you found the hour helpful, useful, come up with different strategies. I want you to go away and reflect on yourself. Only you can work out what works for you. And sometimes we don't spend that time focusing on that. So if you can go away and do that, that would be really helpful, okay? And then you build up your own reflection of yourself and see when you're bringing this burnout, how to stop getting to that bit, and recognizing it's not good for you as well, you know, and being nice to yourself. We're horrible, I think, to ourselves, maybe some of the time. So learn to be nice to yourself. Yeah, thanks, Karen. But yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed it.
Well, thanks so much, Amanda. It's really useful and also nice to have this prompt to help us think, you know, what we need, and it was all really helpful. I'm sure everyone will, you know, have some strategies to bring back to their workplace. And I just put the link in for the survey in the chat box. So if you could fill that in, it's only a couple of questions, and it'll help me tell the grant allocators, you know, how this workshop has been for you. And I wanted to also tell you about the next workshop, where it is kind of a continuation from today. We're going to finding your right difficult in the world of work. So it's titled ADHD Owner's Manual. So check it out. And also Amanda talked about a lot of well-being strategies, you know, which really appreciated, very useful. And we're working on an app with a team that helps neurodiverse families with their well-being. So the app name is Avian, launching on Monday. I'll put the link.